Welcome to the study of Ezekiel 23. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Now, this week we will be graphic in our Bible reading and discussion, so be forewarned. Kevin takes us through the judgment of Jerusalem with other nations.
It's Oholah and Oholibah, and I'll probably pronounce it Oholah before it's all over with, but you know who I'm talking about now. And I've tried to, with the pictures, I've tried to remain consistent with the dress color and everything, so it's not as confusing, because it goes from Oholah to Oholibah. It goes from Assyria to Babylon to Egypt, and so I tried to keep it all together so it makes sense. Somebody like Michael or Wayne want to read 23, 1 through 4?
The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, there were two women, daughters of the same mother. They became prostitutes in Egypt, engaging in prostitution from their youth. In that land, their breasts were fondled and their virgin bosoms caressed. The older was named Oholah, and her sister Oholibah. They were mine and gave birth to sons and daughters. Oholah is Samaria, and Oholibah is Jerusalem.
So you know where God's heading and where he's taking Ezekiel, and Ezekiel is telling this to the people of Jerusalem right now. So, and it's not good news. So these are the accused women, the women who were sinned. They were forebears of the nation of Israel. And they're just, we'll find out who they are here. We'll kind of break this apart. Who are they? Okay. The one mother is the nation of Israel. The two daughters are the northern kingdom, Israel and Samaria. And the other is the southern kingdom, specifically Jerusalem. In their youth, during the formative years in Egypt, before they actually came into a covenant with God, they were worshiping idols, and actually they were stepping away from God. They were worshiping idols, and they were conforming to worldly ways. They were forgetting what God told them already. They trusted in earthly and not heavenly power. Okay, so that's what they mean by in the youth. And if you think about this, try to think of the later state of Israel as a whole as you read this, and it broke it into two parts after Solomon's death, if you'll remember, northern and southern kingdom. Okay. They were mine. The Lord considered both parties, or both cities, as part of his chosen nation. So initially, Samaria and Jerusalem were both part of his promised land. Okay. This is interesting. I looked for the meaning of the names, and one commentary, a New International Commentary on the Old Testament, which is a big, massive one that I use, that is really, really good. They didn't have any firm opinions on what the names meant, but I found another commentary that brought this up, and I used this. In Hebrew, Oholah means her own tabernacle. In other words, that city had their own tabernacle, their own temple. Oholibah means my tabernacle in her. In other words, that's the tabernacle or the temple in Jerusalem, the temple. Okay, so it's referring to God's sanctuaries, but alternatively, because we're talking about them walking away from the Lord in Egypt, it could mean the tents that are set up as shrines to the Canaanite gods, as opposed to God's temple. So as many things in the Bible, there's sometimes two meanings or opposing meanings or different levels of meaning. So just keep that in mind, that there is some meaning to their name. Okay, the older sister, Samaria. The way this thing is broken down, there's about 5 or 6 sentences talking about Samaria. And then there's that would make, there's 49, so that would make 42 or 35 or something like that, that are talking about the younger sister. So Samaria, or Oholah, has already been punished. The Assyrians have already taken her away. And so that's kind of a done deal. So he refers to them both, that she was in the same sin that Jerusalem is, but Jerusalem, being Oholah, saw what happened, saw her fate, and still wandered into it the same way. Okay, so if somebody wants to read 5 through 10.
Oholah engaged in prostitution while she was still mine, and she lusted after her lovers, the Assyrians, warriors clothed in blue, governors and commanders, all of them handsome young men and mounted horsemen. She gave herself as a prostitute to all the elite of the Assyrians and defiled herself with all the idols of everyone she lusted after. She did not give up the prostitution she began in Egypt, when during her youth men slept with her, caressed her virgin bosom, and poured out their lust on her. Therefore I delivered her into the hands of her lovers, the Assyrians, for whom she lusted. They stripped her naked, took away her sons and daughters, and killed her with the sword. She became a byword among women, and punishment was inflicted on her.
Okay. Yeah, I think what it's trying to say here is, even though they came into covenant with God and they moved from Egypt to Israel, there were some who never truly 100% gave themselves to God, and they kept a hold of that sin and immorality that they picked up in Egypt. Israel always looked at other countries and said, we can be like that. They didn't think, we have a covenant with God. We got the best thing we could possibly get. They've forgotten that. They're looking at all the material things. They're looking at the wealth of the Assyrians and the Babylonians and the Egyptians. Well, this is talking about when it finally falls. So the charges against Oholah in verses 5-8. Verse 5, she played the harlot, means she's seeking earthly security and strength through earthly alliances, like with Assyria and eventually Babylon and Egypt. Her sister goes through all three. So they're seeking alliances with earthly political powers rather than trusting in God and having heavenly powers. Okay, verse 6-8. Israel has clung to her fascination with earthly power and trappings since her youth. This goes all the way back to when they were in Egypt. Okay. They poured out their immorality on her. They've been contaminated by their association with Egypt and the Assyrians. Okay. And it's going to come back to bite them. And it's somewhere in here, it talks about Oholah looking at the pictures on the wall of the Babylonians or the Assyrians. I can't remember, but I kind of looked up what Assyrians would ride or wear, and they ride horses, and so they typically dressed in purple, the higher ranks, and that's who these girls were fascinated with. And what they're really talking about is the heads of the state of Israel talking to the heads of Assyria and Babylon and all that. So Oholah's punishment, verses 9-10. Samaria has already been delivered by the time Ezekiel is talking about things. Already been delivered into the hands she lusted for, which is Assyria. But typically, they would have taken her clothes, public nakedness. They would have taken her jewelry. They would have mutilated her face, probably cut off her nose or split her nose and cut off her ears, and taken her children captive. And you'll see, I have an account in here that I found in one of the commentaries from an Assyrian king about how they treated their captives. The reason for mutilating her face, if they didn't kill her, they didn't want her to reproduce, so they wanted to make her physically very unattractive. So this would have ruined her for procreating and raising children to go back against the Assyrians. They would have taken the small children and raised them as Assyrians, probably, just like Moses was raised as an Egyptian. Okay. The adolescents were not so lucky. If you were an adolescent, they would have probably burnt you, put you in a pile and burned you, because they know that the adolescents are old enough that they can remember what they did to their parents and would have probably risen up against them eventually. And we'll read about that here in a little bit. This is a guy named, I'm going to try this, Ashurnasirpal. The second, there was another guy named, no wonder this guy was so angry. Okay, but this is just an account of the action in Kinnebu, which is a city there.
That name.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can read that, but let me go ahead and just read it for you. I felled with the sword 3,000 of their combat troops. I burnt 3,000 captives. I did not leave one of them alive as a hostage. I captured alive Oholibah, their city ruler. I made a pile of their corpses. I burnt their adolescent boys and girls. I flayed their city ruler Oholibah and draped his skin over the wall of the city Dam USA. Is that right? I razed, destroyed, and burnt the city. Moving on from the city, Kinnebu, I approached the city Tela. The city was well fortified. I felled 3,000 of their fighting men with the sword. I carried off prisoners. Oh, they got lucky there. Not really, because they'll be mutilated too. Possessions, oxen, cattle with them. I burnt many captives from them. I captured many troops alive. I cut off some of their arms and hands so they couldn't fight against them ever again. Okay. I cut off others their noses and ears and extremities. I gouged out the eyes of many of the troops. I made one pile of the living and one pile of heads. I couldn't figure out what that meant. I burnt their adolescent boys and girls, and I razed, destroyed, and burnt and consumed the city. So knowing what you know, living in those times, if you're Jerusalem or Samaria, you know this is the kind of treatment you're going to get. It's not going to be good. You hope to be out of town that day, you know? So, can somebody read 11 through 13, maybe Michael?
Her sister Oholibah saw this, yet in her lust and prostitution, she was more depraved than her sister. She too lusted after the Assyrians, governors and commanders, warriors in full dress, mounted horsemen, all handsome young men. I saw that she too defiled herself. Both of them went the same way.
Isn't this just like when we see somebody fail and they don't have successful dealings with somebody? You go, oh yeah, that person took advantage of him or her, but I know how to deal with that person. You don't think that person's really not a good person to deal with. You think I'm smarter than that guy. And that's what's happening here. She's going to follow the exact same path. Okay. And now we're talking about Jerusalem. Okay. Charges against Oholah in 11 through 13. This is referring to her affairs with the Assyrians. And you see they're all they're talking to the high class ruler type people of Assyria. Okay. Oholibah sees her sister's disastrous affairs and then patterns her behavior after her. Does exactly the same thing. Okay, she's overly impressed with the other upper crust of Assyrian society and does not see the danger. Okay, somebody want to read 14 through 18?
But she carried her prostitution still further. She saw men portrayed on a wall, figures of Chaldeans portrayed in red, with belts around their waists and flowing turbans on their heads. All of them looked like Babylonian chariot officers, natives of Chaldea. As soon as she saw them, she lusted after them and sent messengers to them in Chaldea. Then the Babylonians came to her to the bed of love, and in their lust they defiled her. After she had been defiled by them, she turned away from them in disgust. When she carried on her prostitution openly and exposed her naked body, I turned away from her in disgust, just as I had turned away from her sister.
Yeah. Why do you think God's giving Ezekiel this graphic representation instead of saying, you really shouldn't have dealt with the Babylonians, you can't trust them, you shouldn't have done with the Assyrians because they're bloodthirsty? Why do you think he's choosing to use this? Yeah, he wants to make it as reprehensible as possible. You know, if you say, well, we were just dealing with the Babylonians, that's politics. Well, now you were dealing with somebody you should have been dealing with, you know. So he's choosing to use this kind of ugly imagery to make them understand how they are. And he gets angrier as we go on.
Well, today, I mean, if you just look at the way that the world has degenerated into accepting things of a physical nature and all the nudity that's going on in movies and TV and online, I mean, we're going down that same path.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And people, like church people and other people, are trying to fight it, and it's a tough battle. So you want what's that?
They get shocked.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately. Okay. And this is Oholibah's affairs with Babylon, addressed in 14 through 18. And gave them the flowing turbans and the kind of reddish vermilion robes. But you can see that she's very impressed with their clothing and their physical attributes and their physical assets. So she's continuing to be shameless. When things don't work out with the Assyrians, she turns to the Babylonians and invites them to her bed, or they try to deal with the Babylonians. And we all know how dealing with the Babylonians turned out for her. The Assyrians eventually turned away in disgust, and then she turned to the Babylonians. And not surprisingly, Yahweh also turned away in disgust. Okay, and Oholibah's affairs with Egypt. Somebody want to read 19 through 21?
Yet she became more and more promiscuous as she recalled the days of her youth when she was a prostitute in Egypt. There she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys and whose emission was like that of horses. So you longed for the lewdness of your youth, when in Egypt your bosom was caressed and your young breasts fondled.
Okay. Oholibah's affairs with Egypt. Well, howdy, does this one surprise you? No. Okay, now she's returning to the lust of her youth with increased intensity. This is going back, they're going backwards. Everybody else has abandoned her, so she's going back to thinking about Egypt. Coarses its language, it's kind of uncomfortable to hear, and I'm sure it's uncomfortable to read, but Ezekiel likes to shock his audience. We talked about that, and he's doing that here, but it's also emphasizing Yahweh's disgust with them. I mean, just how seedy their behavior is. Okay. This is about her sentencing, what's going to happen to her. Somebody want to read, the first announcement is 22 to 27. So somebody want to read that for us, please?
Therefore, Oholibah, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will stir up your lovers against you, those you turned away from in disgust, and I will bring them against you from every side. The Babylonians and all the Chaldeans, the men of Pekod and Shoa and Koa, and all the Assyrians with them, handsome young men, all of them governors and commanders, chariot officers, and men of high rank, all mounted on horses. They will come against you with weapons, chariots and wagons, and with a throng of people. They will take up positions against you on every side with large and small shields and with helmets. I will turn you over to them for punishment, and they will punish you according to their standards. I will direct my jealous anger against you, and they will deal with you in fury. They will cut off your noses and your ears, and those of you who are left will fall by the sword. They will take away your sons and daughters, and those of you who are left will be consumed by fire. They will also strip you of your clothes and take your fine jewelry. So I will put a stop to the lewdness and prostitution you began in Egypt. You will not look on these things with longing or remember Egypt anymore.
Okay. Again, a repeat of what's going to happen to them. It's pretty standard procedure what they're going to do to them. So you can see that God is angry with them. Okay. And the first announcement, we'll talk about that. We've read 22 through 27. Okay. Yahweh is authorizing the Assyrians and the Babylonians, who he refers to as former lovers, to execute punishments the way they would normally treat an enemy. In other words, God's not going to give them any special treatment and get them out of that. Remember, we talked about nations or the mechanism that God uses to execute his judgment. That's what's happening here, we see. Okay. Specifically talks about the mutilation of her face, slaughter by sword, seizure of children, destruction by fire, public naked exposure, and your jewelry is removed. So pretty much, well, you're dead anyway, so all this other stuff wouldn't make any difference, but it's a sign to other people that if the Assyrians are going to come in and conquer you, this is what you're going to get.
So
Okay.
no mercy, even though the Jews are his people.
Yeah. But they haven't been acting like his people, so this is what you get. Would somebody read 28 through 35, please?
For this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am about to deliver you into the hands of those you hate, to those you turned away from in disgust. They will deal with you in hatred and take away everything you have worked for. They will leave you stark naked, and the shame of your prostitution will be exposed. Your lewdness and promiscuity have brought this on you because you lusted after the nations and defiled yourself with their idols. You have gone the way of your sister, so I will put her cup into your hand. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You will drink your sister's cup, a cup large and deep. It will bring scorn and derision, for it holds so much. You will be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, the cup of ruin and desolation, the cup of your sister Samaria. You will drink it and drain it dry, and chew on its pieces, and you will tear your breast. I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, since you have forgotten me and turned your back on me, you must bear the consequences of your lewdness and prostitution.
Okay. Okay. This is a depiction of the two sisters. And remember, we're talking about Samaria and Jerusalem. The cup is a sign all through the Bible of God's judgment. And she's going to be drinking out of that cup, both of them. And she's going to realize what she's done. It says it'll be filled with drunkenness and sorrow. So she'll know what's happening to her. Okay. Oholibah is being handed over by Yahweh to those she now hates and fears. Okay. She'll be treated horribly, and all the lewd and whorish behaviors will be fully exposed. She's being punished for pursuit of foreign idols over the one true God. They walked away from the covenant. 31 through 34, Yahweh has handed her a cup, and it's a sign of God's judgment, as it always is, and instructed her to drink. And we heard what happens when she does. Okay, because she's turned her back on the Lord, she must bear the weight of her lewdness and her whorish behaviors. Okay, so that's what he's telling her. Okay, and then the charges against Oholah and Oholibah. Okay, and this is where it comes back to almost being a courtroom type affair. Then the first thing in there is, then Yahweh said to me, human, meaning Ezekiel, arraign Oholibah and Oholibah. Okay, somebody want to read 36 through 40?
The Lord said to me, Son of man, will you judge Oholah and Oholibah? Then confront them with their detestable practices, for they have committed adultery, and blood is on their hands. They committed adultery with their idols. They even sacrificed their children, whom they bore to me as food for them. They have also done this to me. At the same time, they defiled my sanctuary and desecrated my Sabbaths. On the very day they sacrificed their children to their idols, they entered my sanctuary and desecrated it. That is what they did in my house. They even sent messengers from men who came from far away. And when they arrived, you bathed yourself for them, applied eye makeup, and put on your jewelry. You sat on an elegant couch with a table spread before it.
Okay. A couple things in here. He's telling them, judge them, but it says in here, they even sacrificed their sons whom they bore to me. I think that they took fellow Israelites down the wrong path. Okay, that's the way I interpret that. So because they're not remaining faithful as leaders, they're taking all the Israelites down the wrong path. Okay, another interesting thing in here. Let's see, where is it? For they had slain their children for their idols on the same day they came into my sanctuary to profane it. That brings me back to the vision of the temple and all the different idols that were going on. But it also tells me that they are involved in possibly Molech worship, because the Molech is the god that they would place the baby on the burning arms or whatever. And so they are really off the beam on this. So they're getting exactly what they deserve. And then 40, it refers to the whorish behavior again. So
we know that first part of verse 39, Kevin, for after they had slain their children for their idols, that's abortion. That's abortion today. They're slaying children for convenience, for lack of responsibility and accountability. It's nothing new under the sun, right?
Yeah. So, and I think that's one of those things where there could be a dual meaning, but I do think they took them off the ground, but abortion is a good thought. So if they're behaving the way they're behaving, that would present itself as an option. Both sisters and cities are to be arraigned, even though Samaria has really been judged and taken care of. It's a legal proceeding with consequences. Their abominations include adultery, idolatry, and blood on their hands. And remember, we talked about the rulers were using their position sometimes to murder people to make their financial system better. They violated the covenant with Yahweh. Okay, they've defiled his sanctuary. We saw a visual representation of that in Ezekiel's vision of the temple, right? When he was in Babylon and they transported him back to see what was going on in Jerusalem in a vision. We saw that. Slaughtering their children as they desecrated their sanctuary. That's got to be knowing how Jesus loves children, we got to know that this is just, he hates this more than anything. So she's lured her lovers to her couch and used oils and incense that was intended only for worshiping Yahweh. They used to entertain their visitors. Okay, and we started to read this, but somebody want to read 41 through 45, please?
You sat on an elegant couch with a table spread before it on which you had placed the incense and olive oil that belonged to me. The noise of a carefree crowd was around her. Drunkards were brought from the desert along with men from the rabble, and they put bracelets on the wrists of the women and her sister and beautiful crowns on their heads. Then I said about the one worn out by adultery, now let them use her as a prostitute, for that is all she is. And they slept with her. As men sleep with a prostitute, so they slept with the lewd women, Oholah and Oholibah. But righteous judges will sentence them to the punishment of women who commit adultery and shed blood, because they are adulterous and the blood is on their hands.
Okay. Again, it repeats, you had set my incense and oil. So they're using temple goods that were dedicated to God for bad purposes. So the one of the commentaries kind of brought this out. The sound of a carefree multitude was with her. It sounds like these things were almost public. These adulterous sessions were public. And even the Sabians were brought in from the wilderness with men of the common sort. Apparently the promiscuity didn't just, at some point, wasn't just with the Assyrian elite and the Babylonian elite. Apparently it was just rampant, and it was horrible. So they're going to be judged as adulteresses, and there are going to be some righteous men that will hold back from it, but so much of this was going on, it has to be punished. Verse 41 is a restatement of verse 40. And as I said, suggests the adulterous activity was open to the public. I just can't imagine that. And even encourage drunkenness. This further cheapens the whole activity. Okay. Verse 43a, let me read that again. When I said concerning her who had grown old in adulteries, will they commit harlotry with her now, and she with them? The first part of that, it just seems like Ezekiel is almost bewildered at what's going on. And he's just kind of asking himself what's going on there. Okay, verse 43b and 44 indicates the depth of the degradation of the rulers and citizens. The two sisters are viewed as common prostitutes. Okay, now he sees this as God sees this as judgment for adultery and murder. They betrayed the marriage covenant with him, and their hands are stained with the blood of children born to him, both their citizens and even their children. They have had some child sacrifice. I don't think we understand how bad things have gotten in Israel. It was just, it was worse than what we see in our cities today. Okay, so somebody want to read the last 46 through 49?
This is what the sovereign Lord says. Bring a mob against them and give them over to terror and plunder. The mob will stone them and cut them down with their swords. They will kill their sons and daughters and burn down their houses. So I will put an end to lewdness in the land, that all women may take warning and not imitate youth. You will suffer the penalty for your lewdness and bear the consequences of your sins of adultery, of idolatry. Then you will know that I am the sovereign Lord.
Okay, two main things and a third parenthetically. Thus I will cause lewdness to cease from the land. He's going to put it into all this abominable behavior. And also, then you shall know that I am God. Okay, or at least the ones left alive will know. So, which isn't going to be a whole lot. So,
And do you think these sins described are of individuals in the nation, or is this an allegory of the nation? So
I'm guessing it is an allegory because the meaning of the names, a temple in her and for Jerusalem.
Okay.
So I'm thinking it's an allegory. Now, Was a lot of this going on? Yeah, but it's really more talking about the political nature of the adulterousness. Okay, they did things with Assyrians and Babylonians and Egyptians that they shouldn't have done. Okay, now was there other physical adultery and harlotry? Yeah, I'm sure that came as part of it.
Because as a nation, they were being unfaithful to God.
Yeah.
And that starts at leadership level.
Mhm.
And that's a big part of the focus, I think, here is be careful how you follow certain leaders, is because are they leading you toward God or away from God?
Yeah. Well, we studied those two kings, right?
Yeah.
And the princes or whatever that never became kings, right? And how badly they were. And I think this is just.
Yeah, we've seen in 2 of the 3 last lessons, we've seen it refer to, that you had the rules for being a good leader and being a good ruler, and you didn't follow them. Yeah, and you had them in Leviticus and Deuteronomy. So
and were they were the ones that were making the covenants with or the promises to Babylon and Assyria, and then breaking them. Yeah,
they were entreating them. Yeah, and we can go into all sorts of, but there was one king that actually started a war with Babylon or something like that, or one of its allies, and that's what got them slammed. So they weren't making really good decisions. Yeah.
Kevin, okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
At this time, is there a remnant in Babylon?
Is there
A remnant of the Israeli people in Babylon?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is the people that Babylon didn't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They remember we talked about they took the good people, the first batch, to Babylon.
Yeah.
And the not so desirable people that probably weren't set up for being good rulers are still in Jerusalem. So a lot of this is the result of all the good rulership.
And this may be a big duh and everybody got there, but it hadn't hit me until right now. This is like, okay, I've talked to you about the rulers. This is you guys.
Yeah.
Like, don't think you're doing what you're doing and you're going to be punished for it. It's not just about the leadership, to your point. Don't follow bad leaders, but it's up to you personally to say, I'm not doing that. Right.
Which goes back to an earlier lesson we had about personal accountability.
Yeah.
That God looks at personal accountability throughout.
Yeah, remember we had a lesson, I'm going back trying to figure out what chapter it was in. We had a lesson where it referred to Jerusalem as a pot, the cauldron.
Yeah.
And the bad meat was the bad people in it.
What was it? Ezekiel and Daniel both in Babylon at this time?
I think they both are. Yeah, they're both in, but they're not contemporaries, I don't believe, are they?
So there's that.
Daniel and Ezekiel.
There's a little bit of overlap.
Yeah. So anyway, there's 3 results that came out, and they're mentioned in 46 through 49. Yahweh will rid the land of lewdness, harlotry, and abomination. Parenthetically, all women are warned against this behavior, and everyone will know that Yahweh is Lord. Okay, so.
Thank you, Kevin. Good job, Kevin.